Hey, John.
Oh, Nick, it's the day before.
We're nearly there. We're
Gosh,
nearly
the
there.
30th. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
I mean, these we started this project out thinking we do. I thought it would be 15 minutes a day, and I think we're averaging about an hour, right?
It's been a bit of a marathon. So my wife is looking forward to a short holiday after tomorrow.
Yeah, mine too. She's like, well, what have you got to do to prepare for tomorrow? I said, no, but I've got to write the write-ups for the page, and I got to do the Twitter thing, and I got, she's like, really? Anyway, I do hope people are looking at those links down below because it takes,
Yeah.
I don't know how, it's like, anyway, anyway, we're almost there. It's almost the Kanreki time. So
that's right.
What are we doing here, Nick?
So we are celebrating J.K. Rowling's 60th birthday, and we're referring to it as the Kanreki because both John and I are huge fans of Japan and Japanese culture, and the 60th birthday is a big deal in Japan. They use the Chinese calendar for years, so they have 12 astrological animals. They have 5 elements. And each year has an animal and an element. That is a combination of 60 different years. So, for example, J.K. Rowling was born in the year of the wood snake. 60 years have gone by and we're back to wood snake year again. So essentially, J.K. Rowling tomorrow will have reached the point in the calendar where she came in and she is ready for her second birth, her rejuvenation, and it's a big deal in Japan. If it is your Kanreki year, you wear a silly red hat, not quite as silly as these hats, but you wear a silly red hat. You have a big party. All of your family, friends, colleagues come and celebrate with you for the start of your second life.
I want to say here, Nick, that
yeah.
I haven't received my invitation to the birthday party.
It's cutting it fine now, isn't it?
I mean, I can't even be there virtually. What's that about?
Well, I think she's closer to you.
Is she still off the coast of Alaska? Do we know where she is now?
I think she's moved south now, so I think she's off Canada.
Okay. I mean, I guess there is a Canadian coast there in between Alaska and
I think the good citizens of British Columbia would argue it's quite a long coast.
Okay. All of the Hong Kong emigres in Vancouver. Thank you for tuning in. But if I were going to be, if I was at Rowling's 60th birthday party, I got her a red hat, Nick.
Oh, wow.
A red hat.
Really?
It's a special red hat. It's a special one because it's for those people who suffer from Trump derangement syndrome. It says make 60 great again.
You need to make sure that the security guards read it in complete words if they're going to let you on that yacht.
I don't think even virtually, but oh well, Joe. I want you to know that I did get you a present for your Kanreki, and next time you're in Oklahoma City, drop on by. I'll keep this on my shelf with my it's not in here, but in my my library bookshelf. It has the unopened Deathly Hallows package. Oh.
So anyway, unfortunately, we can't spend this time in the presence of J.K. Rowling. So we're making do with spending our time in her metaphor for her creative process. So I am here by my beautiful lake pond puddle in South Wales. And John's over there in Oklahoma in his yurt shed. And her metaphor talks of her getting her inspiration handed to her from the lake in her metaphor. Now, that's from her subconscious. It's from her unresolved issues. It's from her life story. It's from the people she's met. It's from the books she's read. That's where the inspiration comes from, that soup. She then takes it to the shed, and
then the shed is where she works her intentional artistry. Now, I've moved out of my garage because one, it's uncomfortable. There are too many crazy bugs in there. And two, I thought for a woman named Rowling, it has a circular aspect to it. And, a ring writer, what better place than a yurt,
Yes.
So
you look much
here's
cooler
where
that.
she uses her traditional tools, and she weaves in the golden threads, which I really think are strands out of the lake that give, that change the lake effluvia into the archetypal stories that have won her an international audience. It's almost a universal audience. Now, I spent 25 years in the shed, and I spent almost all that time working on the traditional tools. Only in the advent of her 2019 and then her 2023, wasn't it? Or 24? Really placing great emphasis on the lake and the lake in the shed. Have I shifted, no doubt in large part due to our friendship with you, to a lake concern, that she's saying that until you understand the lake point of origins for my work, you're not really going to have an appreciation for the artistry and meaning that happens inside the shed. That I'm not making this stuff out of nothing. Ed Shardlow, in our comments, a couple of days ago, we were talking about the pearl imagery with Margot Bamborough, and he said that's a great metaphor. Actually, it's a metaphor about a metaphor. The pearl is a great image for the lake in the shed. There's an irritant inside the oyster. There's something which really is upsetting it, and around it is shaped this, symbol of God's, the light within. That's a. Thank you, Ed. I'm going to use that. I don't know if I'll always credit you, but it's yours. That's really what we're after here, is identifying. That's actually Nick's job, identifying the lake elements, and then revealing how that's transformed really consciously. And so we have the subconscious point of origin, that irritant in the oyster, and then we have the very conscious, deliberate excretions around it to make it into a pearl. And today, Nick, we're
going for a golden thread today. So
yeah.
Golden thread is another of those things that is sort of a sheddy lake, or a lakey shed. So it's it's artistry. So there are themes and tropes that J.K. Rowling uses across her works. So across all of Harry Potter and the standalone novels and the strike novels, she will use this identifiable trope.
We've talked about this
in
this Kanreki celebration. We did 2 shows where we went through very quickly the 14 golden threads that we play with at Hogwarts Professor. The big ones, the most obvious ones are bad dad, violence against women, embedded text, authors. But today we want to talk about one that has been discussed for 3 or 4 years on the moderator back channels at Hogwarts Professor, and that we've never really talked about publicly. And this is weird too, because this is a change up. First of all, it's not a book. We've been doing books all month, but a golden thread, and it's not one that's been discussed before.
No.
We're also going to talk about this lost child golden thread upside down. We're going to start off with the shed evidence, all the places this occurs inside Rowling's work, really from Philosopher's Stone through Running Grave. And then we're going to look into what we know about Rowling for its lake inspiration, which will necessarily be speculative because there is no specifically known thing for Lost Child.
I think very similar.
So, Nick, we got to talk about what
very
a
similar
thread is.
Yeah. And if you want to see maybe a more in-depth look at a golden thread, have a look at the work that John and I have done for Pregnancy Trap. And John mentioned earlier about the very obvious golden threads. Well, once you've studied Pregnancy Trap is an obvious golden thread. But until you've looked at it, then it's not obvious. Once you start looking for it and counting, so there are more than we put on the examples on our podcast. And again, the golden thread we're going to look at today, even just the short period between writing up our notes yesterday and recording today, there are more.
Yeah, this is. I was talking to you about this earlier. That when we were talking about Lethal White and the Jacko Kent's house on the Chisel Estate, and how you drew just the point-to-point correspondence between Rowling's life as a child in Church Cottage and the Jacko Kent household. Well, I don't think anybody else in the world saw that, Nick, and there are millions of people who read that book. And you saw it. But once you see it, now it's just become a trope. Nobody can unsee that.
Yeah.
And there's no way you see it unless you bring it to the work and say, oh, there she is. This is the foundation piece of that. And of course, there's a lost child in there too. All of these pregnancy traps have their corresponding lost child. Now this is really the hallmark of fourth generation Rowling studies. Fourth generation Rowling studies is moving from excitement about the latest work or the one coming out. Let's get all the Twitter headers in a row here. I helped invent that school of anticipation and interpretation. But we've got 21 books now. And rather than just being part of the marketing effort from Rowling Incorporated, now it's time for us to stand back and say, wait a minute, this woman has written more books than Charles Dickens. Maybe not as many pages, but she's written as many books as Dickens. When do we start looking at the work from beginning to end and saying, what does this mean? What is this really about? And that's what this Lake and Shed effort that we do at Hogwarts Professor is about. And Nick has his 4 springs. Thank you, Ed Charlow, again. The 4 springs of the lake. And Nick, those are the key relationships in her life.
Yep.
Key events and experiences in her life.
Yeah.
Education, the core beliefs.
Yeah.
Core beliefs, and then the unresolved issues, traumas, experiences in her life. So those are the lake focus. I mean, you take all the lake elements that it could possibly be things that inspire her. They come up inside the lake. That it's going to be in one of those 4 categories. The shed is even simpler. Of course, it adds up to 7. We got 4 on one side and 3 on the other. But it's basically you have those tools I was talking to you about. This literary alchemy, depictive psychology or psychomachia, ring writing. I'm not going to name them all. There's 7 of them, and then you've got the golden threads, and we've started with those at 14. Again, just like this is not going to be an exhaustive list of lost child today. Those numbers,
no,
in terms of springs and tools and stuff like that, those aren't fixed. Those are. The Rowling Studies 4th generation is really in its infancy. We're really doing the groundwork. I'm pretty sure that, as Rowling Studies matures, people will look back and credit us with our pioneering work and then laugh up their sleeves about how stupid we were. But that's fine. Someone's got to be that set of bones in the desert with an arrow in the back. We're going to be those pioneers. The golden threads are really the new turf because, as Nick just said, it's Lakey Shed and Sheddy Lake. You're going to get stuff that's come from her life and yet is woven into the stories in a way that's very suggestive. There's so many lost children, Nick. I did a quick list, and I found 28 lost children in 21 books. And really, they occur much more often than that because lost children go through all the, they're currently, they stack up against each other. Okay, it's like, so you have to break down how you discuss it. The first breakdown is between the lost child who survives and the lost child who dies and leaves some grieving caretaker, parent, sibling, or whatever. And then further, you have to do the lost child who survives, who lives a positive life, and the lost child who survives, who leads a negative, crazy life. And then among those who died, you have the one where the caretaker was responsible and grieves over their responsibility. And then you have the one where the lost child dies and the caretaker wasn't responsible, but still feels grief. All right. So you've got this huge category. And we're going to go through these, observing the two big divisions between the lost child who survives and the lost child who dies. And we're going to do our pickleball thing. I hope, Nick, where we go back and forth here.
Right. So I'm gonna challenge you first, John. So you get the big one. You get the original.
That's right. I'm going to go right to it. I gaffed the other day and said that Harry Potter had Rowling's green eyes. That would be tough because Rowling does not have green eyes. She doesn't have brown eyes like Daniel Radcliffe either. But anyway, he doesn't. But that's Harry Potter is the original lost child, of course. He's in 7 books, 1 play. He's the child who lives that is positive. Okay, he was beloved by his parents, Lily and James. His mother, Lily, dies sacrificially to protect him from Lord Voldemort, and her love protects him thereafter. We find out, really, that though she can't be seen, her mother is always with him. Dumbledore says, do you doubt that the people who love us ever truly leave us? But we find out with the Resurrection Stone, and we find out in Little Hangleton Graveyard that Lily Potter is always right there. And that's a very positive life. But Nick, Harry has a shadow self who's actually much older than he is. Who is the antithesis? Who's the child who lives who is not living a positive life?
The anti-Harry is Tom Marvolo Riddle, Tom Riddle Jr. So he was conceived as part of a pregnancy trap. So his mother, Merope Gaunt, a woman who was part of, at least in Muggle society, the underclass, used a love potion on her next door neighbor, Tom Riddle Sr., an upper class fella from the manor house next door. The scale fell from his eyes when he realized it was a trap. He abandoned Merope, abandoned the pregnant wife, and returned to Little Hangleton. Another example of a pregnancy trap that didn't work. His mother gave birth to him and died an hour later. Her only wishes were that he looked like his father and that he was named Tom after his father, and his middle name was going to be Marvolo after her father. I think it's safe to say that Tom Riddle surviving, for society at least, was a bad thing.
Yeah, that's a negative. That's a negative, right? Where do you go from there? I'm gonna just. We have so many of these to go through. This is gonna be. We'll save commentary for later, I guess. To me, the next after Harry Potter, the next most important child who lives is Albus Dumbledore, really, and his brother Aberforth, who's kind of his shadow. They're in 7 books. They're in 3 screenplays. They're in. I think Albus makes some kind of cameo appearance in Cursed Child. So I'll put him in. I'll put him in the play. But anyway, their mother Kendra is killed by their sister Ariana. Clearly not an intentional thing. Her mother, she's an obscurial, we think. So, and the mother is killed, and Percival is imprisoned for attacking the Muggle boys who hurt Ariana. I'm with Patrick Macaulay that was almost certainly a rape. Now, so they're orphaned, but I think Albus has just graduated from Hogwarts when his mother is killed.
Yes.
So, he grew up in a loving home. Certainly there was some scandal associated with Percival's revenge and his imprisonment in Azkaban. But all in all, he had a very positive upbringing, certainly had a very positive experience at Hogwarts. And so I put him in the child who lives positive. Okay. Aberforth, I don't know. Whether you want to say that's positive or negative, I mean, he's not a danger to society, but
no,
he seems to be a broken man. Between the death of Ariana and the loss of his son in very questionable circumstances. We don't know if he was sent away by Kendra or what, but anyway, they were both Albus and Aberforth wind up unmarried, and one of them at least is childless. So positive, but men who live very sad lives in the end.
Yeah.
All right, back to you.
Okay, so if we're talking about sad lives, I've got to go to Casual Vacancy. and
whoa, the encyclopedia of misery.
And choose anyone, but I'm going to choose Crystal. I'm going to choose Crystal Whedon. Now, of course, she wasn't an orphan, but I mean, her mother was not present. So in terms of mothering, the only mothering really she got was occasional mothering from Nanakath. She was responsible largely for raising herself and her brother Robbie. She of course didn't survive the book, but if we talk of the child that survived up until that point, I'm going to say that's a good thing. I'm saying that she was, if you look at her benefit to society, she was a benefit to the society in which she lived. So although at the end of the book she died, if you look at the people that through their interaction with Crystal are reevaluating their morality and mortality in a positive way, I'm saying she was a good thing.
Well, yeah, she saves Fat's life.
Yeah.
He's got a knee nut allergy. What does she say? Yeah, I concur. Her name means basically the Christ figure who's been pissed on.
Yeah.
And she has a miserable existence, but she's trying to do the best thing.
Yeah.
She's the de facto mother to her younger brother. Yeah. And caretaker to her own mother. And she's brutalized by every person she comes in contact with. Consequently, she's almost out of control. Okay. I think I can top that, though, for misery.
Okay.
That's basically the backdrop star of the Fantastic Beasts film franchise is Credence Barebones, Aurelius Dumbledore. He's in every one of the 3 screenplays. He stars in the first one. He's the mystery bad guy, other than Gellert Grindelwald. And it turns out that he's the son of Aberforth Dumbledore and a nameless, I think it's a Muggle woman, isn't it?
I think assumed to be Muggle. So it's it was a combined wizarding Muggle community, and I think assumed Muggle, but I don't think it's ever been plainly stated.
Right, and she's never given a name.
No.
Okay. But because he's somehow sent away and then switched, his life is only spared because he switched by Leta Lestrange with Corvus Lestrange V. Credence survives, but he winds up in the Barebones orphanage of all places, where he becomes an Obscurial. He's got this repressed magical power. He's the child who lives, and again, Nick, positive or negative, when that Obscurus comes loose, that's pretty negative. But I think all in all, you have, especially his is basically sacrificial assault on Gellert Grindelwald in the Secrets of Dumbledore's Conclusion.
Yeah.
We have to say that was positive. And it's certainly one that was spent in undeserved agony, as basically his whole identity is that he's the lost child. He doesn't know where he's from. He finds out where he's from. He feels that they threw him out. He only finds out, in this mirror realm that Dumbledore uses during their fight that they didn't even know existed. They thought he was dead. So he spends his life in search of his origin, whence the Obscurus, which takes him over. So very sad story, but all in all positive that he lived. Can you top that for Misery, Nick?
Well, I'm going to have to go to the Crystal Whedon of the Strike series. So this is an individual brought up in filthy, squalid conditions with a drug-addicted mother and absent father. Cormoran Strike. So
Bluey.
Now, you couldn't say that Leda Strike was absent. So you can criticize her parenting as much as you like, but she was parenting.
There's a bad dad there, though, Nick.
There's certainly a bad dad there. But so he wasn't really a lost child until Leda died under, we're almost sure, murderous circumstances. So he was already at university when that occurred, but this was such a shake for him. He'd embarked on from what was an underclass existence to what would be a very, at least middle class, living as a student in Oxford University. He packs all that in and enlists, not as an officer, he enlists as a man of the ranks in the least fashionable arm of the British Army, the Royal Military Police.
Isn't it safe to say when you get an Oxbridge education that you're presumed to have raised a class notch?
I think it's fair to say that that's the presumption. These days, there's such cachet in having working class credentials that you see quite a few, certainly people who have a television presence, working very hard against that.
Yeah. Anyway, Cormoran Strike as a lost child, that means that we have, and just in the 2 series that we have Harry Potter,
yeah,
the Dark Lord, and Cormoran Strike as lost children. So there's gradients of importance here among lost children. A lot of people are just one-off, but that's 7 books in which the featured player is a lost child who is struggling with his identity, between Cornwall and London.
Yes.
As the son of Johnny Ropey, the bad dad, and the mother who mysteriously died.
Yes.
That's the overarching story.
Yeah. So
Cormoran Strike.
So again, I mean, people could quibble and say, well, he's an orphan in the technical sense, but he was at university, so he was over the age of 18 at which that occurred. But we're calling a lost child an individual that is adrift from their family.
Yeah, and the bad dad here, his absence is so closely felt by Strike.
Yes.
That he definitely feels. Talk about flotsam and jetsam. The existence of Lita Strike and Lucy, and seriously, that's instability. That's a lost child.
Yes.
Today, certainly CPS would be hunting that family.
Yeah.
There's simply no way that would continue to exist. All right, I don't have anything like Cormoran Strike. That you played a trump card there. Did I say Trump? Anyway, you played a you played a royal card. Yeah. I'm going to the daughter of a royal card, and a Cormoran Strike mirror reflection. She's only in one book.
Yeah, but
it's so closely. Well, one, it's probably the best single novel Rowling has written. I think in terms of, I think history will say that Troubled Blood is the peak of her writing skills thus far. I'm talking about Anna Phipps. Anna Phipps, who is the daughter of Roy Phipps and Margot Bamborough. Roy Phipps being appointed to King Philip, in the allegory, Roy being king, and Margot Bamborough with her authentic working class background. She is conflicted because while still a young child, Margot disappears. And so she is a child who lives, and it's positive. Now, she grows up, Roy Phipps remarries to a distant cousin, and she grows up in a life of privilege and doesn't learn until well into her life that the stepmother is not actually her biological mother. And that kind of sends her sideways. She winds up a lesbian, which is to say, a woman that chooses not to have children. I know there's ways around that now, but she marries an image of her own mother. I mean, she is really haunted by this mother. I mean that literally and metaphorically, because I think Margot Bamborough haunts every person that's in her life inside that book. And she hires Strike to find out what happened to her mother. Now, she's lived a very positive existence. She and her partner are well-to-do and people that are doing their best. There's no crime element there. There's no psychopathology involved. But she's someone who lives under the mystery of what happened to her mother, and that is the impetus. That's sort of the inciting incident of Troubled Blood. Is Anna Phipps, just coincidentally running into Cormoran Strike at a pub in Cornwall. Now that's again, I think evidence of Margot Bamborough's pushing things along. But that you can't forget Anna Phipps when you list the lost children. She's the cause of the best book that Rowling has written. Top that, Nick.
Okay, so I'm going to go for the tricky one of the series, and it was tricky when we did Pregnancy Traps as well. I'm going to go for the Christmas Pig, and so the lost child in the Christmas Pig is Jack Jones.
The child who goes to the land of the lost.
He goes to the land of the lost. Now, you could argue. I mean, what? He was gone for a night. Come on. But so at the point he left, his father is absent. He's upset with his mother. He voluntarily goes to the land of the lost. that puts his existence in complete jeopardy. And for the majority of that story, Alan Narnia, he is separated from his family. He is on his own. He is a child who is lost.
I like that. That's good. I don't like being, outplayed, but that was a really good one. Jack Jones. Yeah, I would say too that you're seeing in Jack Jones, the loving, attentive mother and the bad dad that's broken up the family and done this and that. Not hard to see Church Cottage in there. That's that. Okay, good. But I can top that, Nick.
Okay.
I can top that. Actually, I can't top that because you're actually using a book that was written by J.K. Rowling. All I've got is a play that was written by Jack Thorne. But in that, I've got Delphine Diggory. Okay, she's only in one play, and some people think it's fan fiction. I get it. But Nick, talk about a lost child. Okay, she's the illegitimate daughter of the Dark Lord himself, another lost child, and Bellatrix Lestrange, who is one twisted woman.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a child who lives, and it's negative. Certainly, I mean, you talked about Jack Jones. He's a child who lives, and that was very positive. I mean, he turns into this Christ figure. At the end, he defeats the loser. It basically sends Satan back to hell. It's great. But Delphine Diggory, no, she's entirely negative. She's the child of her biological parents. Albus who kind of plays the lost child a little bit. And I'm not going to count Albus Dumbledore, Albus Potter as a lost child. Let somebody else pick up that thread. But at the end, he wants to kill Delphine, and Harry, does the shrieking shack scene. This prevents his son from, killing Delphine. But he says to her, "You can't remake your life. You'll always be an orphan. That never leaves you." Okay, so basically you get super lost child talking to the lost child of a lost child about what it means to be a lost child. It's forever. You can't get away from this. But that Freudian family romance that shapes us all. There's always some crisis about our upbringing that really shapes us. He says that's it, the lost child. So we get. I don't know if that could be a Jack Thorne line. Forgive me, but I'm gonna assume that the place of the bad guy, who's a girl, in the story being a lost child is definitely considered to be a mirror to the Dark Lord lost child.
Okay, I've not been pulling my weight here with the negatives, so I'm going to come out with a big gun. Dennis Creed. I think we can all agree Dennis Creed is a bad thing. So he had
his mother says it's a bad thing.
Yeah. So he had a horrible life. So he was born as the result of a rape. So his mother, Agnes, was raped by her stepfather, Audrey. Audrey threatened to kill the baby as soon as he was born, and he severely abused the boy as he was growing up. Agnes left the stepfather's house at age 16. So at that point, Dennis had just turned 2. Now that meant that Agnes was raped by her stepfather at the age of 14 or thereabouts. She only saw her son a couple of times thereafter, and the last time was when he was 5 years old. Troubled as that upbringing was, Creed was a psychopath and a sadist, and society would have been better off without him.
Which she says herself, right?
Yeah.
In conversation. And that's wow, that's a good one. I can't top that one. That's really good. And again, that's in what I think is her best work.
Yeah.
You have the it's not the actual murderer, that's relevant to the plot line in Margot Bamborough, but it's the horrific backdrop to the story. I mean, all of Creed's victims are really present in that story. All the people that were tortured and murdered. I mean, he not only kills his victims, he tortures them in ways that it's funny that the career of evil, and in terms of the ring structure of the first 7 books, clearly Troubled Blood, Dennis Creed matches almost anything. Well, it actually matches and exceeds any of the madness of Donnie Lang.
Yeah.
In that, because I mean, Donnie Lang only cut up his dead victims. Yeah. Creed cuts them up while they're still alive. I mean, it's sadistic. Okay, how do I top that? How do I gotta do some mental floss here. Gotta get rid of my Dennis Creed piece. I'm gonna go to the next book. I'm gonna go to Ink Black Heart. And I think this is going to be Lost Child positive, and that is the co-creators of the cartoon Ink Black Heart, Edie Ledwell and Josh Blay. And just to check this, I'm going to read from the passages at the Strike Fans site, which is always, in my experience, the best place to go for quick confirmation of names and data and stuff like that, and timelines. Love going to Strike Fans. So here's what they say about Edie. They say Edie's mother died when she was a small child. Her uncle, Grant Ledwell, was unmarried and working in Oman at the time, so it was unable to take her in. He doesn't really star as a caretaker thereafter, but okay. As a consequence, she was brought up in a series of foster families. She is truly a lost child, right? Josh, again, this is from Strike Fans, was raised by a single father who is a raging alcoholic, but in the time of the story, they're no longer in touch. He grew up on the Lismore Circus estate, which is also where Willie Cardew lives with his grandmother and sister. Okay, but again, the front and the back, and they're mirror images of each other. Josh is literally a mirror. His organs are mirrored inside. Of male and female, co-creators on this story. They're both lost children. They were a positive effect on the world. They didn't lead happy lives by any stretch of the imagination. But they created positive artistry, and they died as victims. But I guess Josh is still alive. Still, what a there you go, Nick. There's any more strikes in there? Any lost children? Yeah.
Well, there's we can stick with Ink Black Heart and go for Zoe Hoare. So Zoe was the very stick thin tattooist in Ink Black Heart. She lost her mum very early, and she grew up in care. So she grew up essentially looked after by the state as an orphan. She attempted suicide when she was 14. She cut her wrists. She later tattooed over those scars. She was groomed by Tim Ashcroft initially from the age of 13. I should say Tim Ashcroft, the paedophile, at the age of 13. Positive or negative? I mean, she's had a horrible life, and she was exploited by bad people. She made no poor decisions herself. I'm going to call her a positive. She was rescued at the end of Ink Black Heart, and I like to think that was a springboard for being a positive influence on the world.
Yeah, and her name. Yeah, I think sometime in this 3-day marathon we've been running, I talked about Zoe's name and how every time she appears in the book, it's a catalyst to inspiration and insight on Robin and Cormoran's part, though it seems to be a distraction at the time. Zoe is always something larger than that. She's named for the Greek word for spiritual life. And yet, like Crystal Wheaton, Zoe is just crushed by the world. So yeah, a net positive. Tragedy, but a net positive. Nick, every time I got one. That was from the same book. You decided to kill me on the same book. I'm gonna go to the next book because I'm sure there's more lost children inside Ink Black Heart. Go ahead and find them. At that art center, isn't there a crazy little boy there? Is he a lost child? He certainly acts like one. All right, for future Golden Thread followers. All right, Abigail Glover. I'm going right to Running Grave here. One book, and thankfully only one book. She's a lost child, and it's a negative. She's a murderess. She's nuts. Again, from Strike fans. Abigail Glover, née Wace, is the daughter of Jonathan Wace, leader of the Universal Unitarian Church, the UHC, and Jennifer Wace. Her mother drowned off Cromer Beach in 1988. Abigail was estranged from her father after leaving the UHC when she was 16. And when Strike meets her, she's a firefighter. Now, but Abigail Glover is again, a lost child. Her mother dies. Her dad's indifferent, marries a nutcase in Mama Wace, Mama Mazu. And Mama Mazu has a daughter with Alexander Graves, we think. Never got that DNA test on her because she just disappears. And Abigail, does what Abigail does. She comes up with this ingenious scheme to eliminate Dayu to get her father's attention back. And then all the people that are involved at the UHC in that compound, she psychologically, diminishes, degrades, and ultimately destroys them. Several of them attempt suicide because they're so frightened of her. So there's a lost child, Nick, and I'm giving that one a big minus. She's a negative. Can you beat that?
I'm struggling, honestly. So I'm going to have to circle back to Harry Potter. I'm going to circle back to Harry Potter, and I'm going to go for Neville Longbottom. So his parents,
Neville?
Yeah. So his parents didn't die, but they were Aurors. They were members of the Order of the Phoenix, and they were tortured by Bellatrix Lestrange. They lost their minds, essentially. So they're just shells of themselves, living in St. Mungo's hospital. Neville, of course, then raised by a good-hearted but very odd grandmother. I think we can count him as a lost child and definitely a positive effect on society, not least because he was instrumental in destroying the Dark Lord in the end.
Certainly a tortured young man. He had thoughts that he was a squib until well into his childhood. Okay, that's a good one. I should have guessed if we had the Dark Lord, lost child, doppelganger to Harry Potter, that the other doppelganger to Harry Potter, Neville Longbottom, would be positive, right? Okay. I'm really scratching here. Okay, but I'm gonna go with Barty Crouch Jr. He's only in one book. He's only in Goblet. They suck a soul out at the end of the book. He's not coming back. Okay, and I'm gonna say he's a lost child who is negative. Okay, he's got a bad dad. But his mother, who loves him, dies sacrificially on her deathbed via polyjuice potion. Right? They do that switcheroo at Azkaban. Yeah. And I think the son was already around the twist in terms of being a negative. He was already a Death Eater. But the death of his mother and his imprisonment by his father, though comfortable, I think really just, he finally has to fight off the curses that are keeping him in place. And he becomes adept at the very potion that his mother used to rescue him, right? The polyjuice potion. And ultimately, he dies in service to the Dark Lord. So I'm going to say he qualifies as a lost child, and that it was very negative.
Okay.
And I got one more. Because I'm going to do, before we leave the lost child who lives categories, I want to suggest that Raphael Chisel is a lost child.
Okay.
Now, I mean, he's got a dad, but his dad is really angry about his existence. That's a pretty close parallel to.
But that's Barty Crouch Jr. as well. That's Barty Crouch Jr. as well. They both killed their fathers. They made themselves orphans.
That's why I did this follow-up because I was just like, wait,
yeah.
There's Goblet of Fire, and then there's Lethal Light. It's parallel book. He's not a true orphan. His dad is alive and his mother is alive too, but he's a psychopathic narcissist due to the treatment of his mother, who's indifferent really to him. She was using him as a tool, talking about a pregnancy trap. And the dad, who was, essentially the victim of the pregnancy trap. And then his crazy brother, Freddie Chisel, okay, who tortures him inside the Horse of Uffington. Now that, I think we have to say he was a lost child. But I definitely will accept correction from people who say, no, you can't
okay. If you're going to have a last one, I have a last one as well. The Ichthyoboggles. The Ichthyoboggles are lost children by biological imperative. So it's their method of reproducing is the parent Ichabog dies at the point of birth. So not just the two Ichthyoboggles we're introduced to in the Ichabog. So one was born witnessing Flapoon firing a gun. He becomes a nasty Ichabog. Later, somewhat rehabilitated by New Republican Fred. The other one is born witnessing Daisy comforting the dying Ichabog. He becomes nice Ichabog. But you could say every Ichabog, because it's their method of reproduction is the parent dies in childbirth.
Wow, and really, if you draw that metaphor out, that the lost child is like this is Harry Potter and Cursed Child saying you're always, the condition of your birth if you're a lost child. Whoa, wow, that was a good one. That was a good one, Nick. That's a good closer on the lost child who lives thing, the Ichthyoboggles. That's great. Have we got a count here for positive and negative? Oh, we're going to do that at the very end. We're going to
let's do that at the end because we've got okay. Two categories, haven't we?
Yeah. Now we go to the lost child who died, right?
Okay.
Not the boy who lived. Now we go to the boy who died. Are you going to start this, or am I starting this one?
I can start this. So we've already mentioned her when we did the lost children who survived in the Dumbledore. So Ariana, of course, did not survive. So she's half-blood witch. She's the only daughter in that family, younger sister of Albus and Aberforth. At the age of 6, so at a very young age, she was attacked by muggles who saw her practicing underage magic that left her traumatized to the point her abilities were uncontrollable. Accidentally, she caused the death of her mother, and then she was killed during a 3-way duel with Grindelwald, Albus, and Aberforth.
And the grieving caretakers are Aberforth and Albus.
And Albus, yeah. For
who spend
to the end of their days.
Lives. But is that a caretaker responsible or a caretaker not responsible?
So Albus felt himself to be responsible. And I think that's more a reflection of his character. So I don't think he's never really sure what caused her death, but he felt himself responsible for it.
he felt the remorse, right?
Yeah.
He's the alchemist, and he has that transition. Okay, that's and certainly what we see in the goblets of poison that Harry forces down his throat inside the cave in Half-Blood Prince.
Yeah.
That's his breakdown moment. That's his saw away at coagula moment. That's where he's dissolved. And Harry later explains to Aberforth, your brother never got over that. That was your brother's primary agony. Okay, so that goes in the lost child, caretaker, responsible. Certainly Gellert Grindelwald never accepted responsibility for that. And Aberforth seemed to have just grief.
Yes.
I don't know if it was grief that he felt that he was responsible. It was just agony that his sister had died. You can't top that. That Ariana Dumbledore is really kind of at the bottom of a lot of what happens, certainly in the Fantastic Beasts book, but also in Harry Potter because of the large place that Dumbledore plays in that. I'm gonna go to your book, Nick. I'm gonna grab the casual vacancy out of your hand and say that even though it's very late in the book, really at the very end of the book, Robbie Whedon is the lost child who dies, and the caretaker, like Dumbledore, takes full responsibility. I mean, Crystal didn't throw him off the bridge, but she is the she takes full responsibility that if she hadn't been she was in the process of trying to save him with a pregnancy trap with Fats, and instead it leads directly to the death of her younger brother, which is really because of her really maternal affection for her brother is really the spot of true, really unblemished love that she has for the human being. It's really where her heart is. And that he dies means end of game for Crystal. She immediately goes home, does the bathtub suicide thing. Robbie is the person who's supposed to be saved by the Good Samaritan. And certainly have the Sikh girl who tries to save him, but he dies. And she kills herself because of her negligence, which was large part responsible for the boy's death. So, yeah, lost child, caretaker, responsible. You're back to you, Nick. I'm gonna go over here and have a little cry about poor Robbie.
There's going to be a few of these, I think. Okay, I'm gonna go for the Fantastic Beasts franchise and say Corvus Lestrange. So he, as an infant, was traveling on a ship with his caretaker, Leta Lestrange. She swapped him with another child because he was crying too much. As a result of that swap, he drowned. And that basically plagued Leta's life for the rest of her life. So she left her with feelings of intense self-loathing, left her childhood an isolated and unhappy one. The only sort of bright spot was that friendship with Newt Scamander, and that story was cut tragically short in the film series.
Well, not only is it cut short in that we have kind of a bizarre finish to it.
Yeah.
But they cut all of her scenes.
Yeah.
That Corvus Lestrange, Credence Barebones thing is meant to be, the driving force of what's going forward with the story, and it just gets mangled.
Yeah.
But I think you got to say, boy who dies, caretaker responsible, because Leta feels it. She was a child.
Yeah.
She had no real malice involved here, but she never felt anything but remorse about that death. And it's certainly you like that dance scene. I think got cut from the final film.
Yeah.
Where she projects up this thing, and certainly the Bogart always shows this child drowning, this thing drowning. That reflects almost a lake thing. This is her unconscious mind. This just shapes how she thinks of herself. She's a bad girl. Whew, well, that was a good one. I didn't think there were going to be that many good ones from the Fantastic Beasts thing. That's good. I'm going to go with to top that, Nick, though, I'm going to go with a graphic one. I'm going to go with the Lang baby that Strike encounters in Cyprus. I always want to say Crete, but it was Cyprus, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Or is it
Cyprus is where there's still a British military base.
So Strike breaks in and to the house and finds Rona Lang, young mother, tied to a bed frame, bloodied. Man, it's a child who's in its own waste and crying. Oh, the Lang baby is only in one scene in one book, but it bleeds out through the entire story because it's the lost child. It dies eventually, even though it's alive when Strike finds the child. The bairn, as Margaret Bunyan calls it, that death, one parent takes responsibility for it, one doesn't. Okay, that the death of the child sends Donnie Lang into full revenge mode. His whole life becomes dedicated to killing Cormoran Strike. He thinks that Strike and his ex-wife killed the baby, which is to testify to absolute madness. And the mother and the grandmother, Rona and then Margaret Bunyan, they grieve the child. You know, she's been made barren by his physical violence, graphically torturous violence. But basically, the lost child here is the driving force of Career of Evil. Because one doesn't accept responsibility and he's the one that drives it on. I don't know how you count that. I mean, he blames Strike and the wife. So I'm going to say not responsible, but obsessed.
Yes.
With the death of that child. That's pretty gross. Your turn. I got to rest after that.
Okay. So all right. If you've got a baby, I'm going to go for the child of Kinvara. So Kinvara miscarries. It's termed a stillbirth in the books. That's usually referred to a fairly late term miscarriage. So usually it's termed a stillbirth if normally you would expect the fetus to be viable at that age. So it dies in utero and is then born dead. Understandably, this takes its toll on Kinvara mentally. So she's hospitalized for what's termed nervous exhaustion, essentially a mental breakdown. You could argue that all of this nonsense cooked up with Rafe is sort of a consequence of that mental breakdown and the breakdown in relationship with her husband. Certainly for Kinvara, it is a very traumatic episode.
Izzy makes some kind of like sideways reference.
Yeah, she says, of course I believe in mental illness, Raph said. Izzy, apparently stung. Of course I do. I was sorry for her when it happened. I was, Raph. Kinvara had a stillbirth 2 years ago, Izzy explained, and of course that's sad. Of course it is. And it's quite understandable that she was a bit, afterwards. But no, I'm not sorry. But she uses it. She does, Raph. She thinks it entitles her to everything she wants.
At the Chiswell estate, though, aren't they having a conversation? And Izzy makes some sort of careless aside that reminds Kinvara of her dead child. Yeah. She runs from the room. That's the reference to how she uses it. But I think you're right in saying that a more sympathetic reading than Izzy's.
Yeah.
Not famous for her upper middle class sensitivities, but she's so destabilized by delivering a child that probably was, if it had been alive, would have been viable. It was alive. But that's of all, even among miscarriages, that's got to be incredibly traumatic.
Yes.
Seeing the whole child born. There was a similar experience in my own family that not me and my wife, but so yeah, that's a wow. Okay. Hit me a little closer than I thought there, Nick. I neglected that one. You got me. I'm gonna go to same book. One of the most moving scenes that Strike has in the series is he goes to see Rhiannon win. Goes to see Della win. And Rhiannon Wynn is there in this giant portrait, this blind woman's apartment. And she's got this giant portrait of her daughter, which means that she's blind, so she can't see the painting. I don't know if this is Granger has done this, but it's just kind of odd. The largest visual effect in the room is of the blind woman's dead daughter. And again, it's only in one book. It's only in Lethal White. And here you got the lost child, and the parents are not responsible. Okay, as weird as Della and Geraint are as a couple, are they the only Welsh characters in the Cormoran Strike series?
Yes, I think they are.
Well, they're both working class people that have worked themselves up.
Yes.
And they're good socialists. So this must be, yeah.
From here, from the Vale of Glamorgan. So she was MP for the Vale of Glamorgan.
But they're not mentally stable. And I think their mental instability really is consequent to the death of their only child, Rhiannon. Rhiannon was cyberbullied by Freddie Chiswell into suicide. So no love lost between the Chisels and the Wynns. There's a Raphael Chiswell parallel here in being bullied by Freddie Chiswell, but he chooses murder as his revenge rather than suicide as a reaction. And I'm gonna go for a double on this, Nick, because I think Amir Malik is also a lost child, and that his biological family rejects him, consequent to rumors of his being a sodomite with somebody in the UK government. That's another living lost child. In that case, it was positive, but the child who dies, the lost child who dies, that's Rhiannon Wynn. That's, and I think she haunts this book too.
Yeah.
But again, the parents weren't responsible there. That's one of the rare ones where the parents are just kind of off the picture. Is there any way the parents could be blamed for the death by bullying of Rhiannon Wynn?
Yeah, I think that's a tricky one. I mean, any parent of a child who dies, particularly of a child who dies by suicide, is going to feel guilt. Whether that's rational or not, it's always that, well, we could have bought her a pony. Yeah, she wanted a pony, but we're good socialists. So no, we didn't get her a pony. We said, take up fencing instead. You're always, and as crazy as that is, I think that's human nature.
Yeah, and it's also Rowling talking about class distinctions, isn't it? That's a pretty heavy one.
Yeah.
Well, these childhood died ones, Nick. This is a tough one. Go on. Let's get through this. Let's start. This is like.
Okay. Oh, crumbs! It's relentless, isn't it? Again, it's another of these things with the golden threads. The more you look at it, the more relentless it seems. Cedric Diggory. Most heartbreaking scene in Goblet of Fire is Amos discovering that Cedric is dead. He was an obnoxious father. We were not rooting for Amos when we were introduced to him. But I defy anyone to read through that book and not have their heart broken at his anguish at discovering his pride and joy, his son had died. I mean, if you want to take Cursed Child, please take Cursed Child. It sends it, according to that story, it sends him loopy. It sends him insane to the point that he's willing to risk the structure of the whole world to try and bring his son back. Does he feel responsible? No, I don't think he does. I think he holds, initially rationally, he holds Voldemort responsible. I think, a la Cursed Child, for whatever reason, he holds Harry responsible for not putting it right.
Okay, I'm gonna go off the board again. I already offered Donnie and Rona Lang's child, who I believe is unnamed. We get a name for just referred to as the Bairn by the grandmother. I'm going to go with another unnamed child, and that is the fetus inside Gloria Conti, conceived by Luca Ricci and Gloria Conti. Obviously, in a relationship that has no balance of power. And it's in one book. It's the foundation crime, really, of the Margot Bamborough death and disappearance. And there's a lost child who dies, and the mother is responsible. Okay, now she was oblivious, but I brought the troubled blood with me out from the yurt because this is well, I'm going to talk about this at greater length later. But I mean, the mother's claims responsibility for this largely, though, falls on Margot Bamborough, I think, because she facilitates the abortion. And this child dies by feticide that was enabled by Margot Bamborough. And that's the reason we're talking about this in large part is because there's a mystery about, whether that's a good thing, a bad thing. How's that play? The medieval morality play inside the story says it's a bad thing. In the story, as told by Rowling Galbraith, seems to have been ultimately a good thing.
So Gloria, I think, would answer that question. Yes, it was a good thing. Yes, it was a bad thing.
Yet every year on September 14th, she grieves for that child.
Yes. So she has no doubt that was a tragedy and that was a bad thing, but she also has no doubt that saved her life.
And this is like Rowling's commentary about was Harry truly dead at King's Cross? Is that the afterlife?
Yeah.
And she says, I want my readers to have a debate about that. Yeah. Now, we know in a way where Rowling stands on the immortality of the soul. She's been pretty vocal about that. But she says she doesn't want to lay this out so that it's cut and dried.
Yeah.
And I think we'll talk more about this, but as we've said, person responsible, irresponsible, or not accepting responsibility. Gloria Conti seems in the end to accept responsibility, but sees the front and the back of this tragedy that saved her life.
Okay. I mean, yeah, I'm not going to top that, am I? What can I? Okay, all right. The Drowned Prophet, Dayu Weiss. I want to talk about ambiguity in terms of mortality and morality of the caregivers. So she was murdered. She was chopped up and fed to pigs. She was not a nice person, but she was a little girl, and sometimes little girls are not nice people. She was treated as a princess. Do her parents feel responsible? Her caregivers? Well, they're two different things. Her parents weren't really her caregivers. Her parents do not feel responsible. They, I think if you were to give them Veritaserum and ask them, they would say that her dying was a good thing. So it allowed them to develop this mythology that they'd created around their uh, cult. I was just about to call it a church, but I won't disgrace that word, calling it that, with their cult. Their caregivers. Well, I mean, really, that was the children around them, and we know that. Forgive me, I can't think of her name. The girl that was in charge of the dormitory felt
Carrie
responsible.
Makepeace?
Yes,
Carrie, yeah.
felt responsible.
Again, there's a suggestion inside Running Grave that the parents were relieved that she disappeared.
Yeah, there's that suggestion. I mean, it takes the question over the legitimacy of that bequest off the table. And it is now the cornerstone. The loss of their child is the cornerstone of their religion.
Okay, I mentioned that controversy. Can't top that. In terms of centrality, that is the murder inside this. That's Alec Hell Glover's victim. Okay. But the backdrop to that, and this one is Alexander Graves.
Yeah.
I mean, he's kind of was he called the hanged prophet?
Yes.
And the Colonel and Barbara grieved for him as their child who died.
Stolen prophet.
Stolen prophet.
Yeah.
He's only in one book. He's a lost child who dies. He's an adult, but he's their child that they mourn for. The parents don't accept responsibility for his death, though one of them says we never should have let him go to that cult. And he's seemingly the father of Dayu Mace. Anyway, that big question mark on Alexander Graves. Not anywhere near as good as Dayu Mace. I'm sorry. But there's a better one in that book.
Okay.
And that's Jacob Pirbright. Louise Pirbright's son that is born disabled. And they keep him alive in a murderous community. I'm not sure why they keep him alive. Maybe just to torture and keep Louise and Becca there in line. This is one book. It's a lost child who lives a miserable life and who dies in the end. I think only because they know that Robin is going to report Jacob's existence. But he dies not before bringing the mother to madness. Okay. And the parent responsible clearly accepts responsibility, but I'm not sure whether she's accepting responsibility for his living death, or for his existence. That the child should have been eliminated before it was born because of its disability. It's a really, the revelation too comes at a bizarre point in the story when Robin has just come out of this Skinner box on steroids. She's been tortured. And then she's confronted with Jacob Pirbright up close and personal, right? And, if Robin isn't already out of her mind, that is, that takes her around the twist. Her concern about her saving children thing and being confronted with this lost child. She literally explodes. She becomes more than psychic. She understands her only way out is strike, and she knows that strike is there, and out she goes. But Jacob Pirbright's existence, it's interesting. Jacob Pirbright's not mentioned anywhere in things like the Wikipedia page or Strike fans or this and that. But it is, Jacob Pirbright is really critical for getting into the crime of the UHC.
You mentioned Louise. There's one I've forgotten. Louise Tucker in Troubled Blood. So she was the young girl, the 16-year-old girl that was killed by Dennis Creed, and her father was driven insane. So Roy says the man was half insane. I saw then what living with something like this could do to you. The obsession had taken over his entire life. So the father was driven half insane, was obsessed. He was the caregiver. Did he feel responsible? I'm going to say no. So Louise Tucker was a troubled child. So she skipped school, and I'm sure there was some thought by her father, what could I have done differently? But he had the bogeyman ready to blame. He had the source of the blame. He just needed to prove it. And that's what he spent the rest of his life doing, was demonstrating that Dennis Creed was responsible for my child's death.
Yeah, they use the word haunted several times to describe it,
Yeah.
and I definitely think that he was. Um, uh, there's some other things in that book.
Yeah.
There's, and these are stretches. There's Will Edensor himself as a lost child. Literally the whole book is trying to find the lost child. And Sally Edensor eventually dies. I think it's from grief, for longing for her boy. And then there's Will Edensor's daughter, forgetting her name. Eventually, the daughter is named Sally. Eventually, it's King or something like that. And is that the child that was taken away from its mother that Robin acted as a midwife for, and winds up in Mazu Wace's London?
No, that's a different child, I think, because Will's daughter is sort of oh no, you're right. It's a second child, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is another child. But anyway, you wind up with a lost child there that Robin rescues from Mazu Wace, Mama Mazu. It's just taken away from her mother. I mean, again, we just started this. You can say Charlie Bristow and Luna Landru were lost children, and that, Yvette Bristow, grieves for them. We got Lula Landru because Marlene Hickson grieves for her, and there's Charlotte's baby that Strike doesn't really understand what went on there in terms of its death. Then with the child who lives, you got everything from Orlando Quine to Severus Snape and Sirius Black and their relationships with their family. You got Donnie Lang as a lost child because his dad hates him and his mother doesn't take care of him. You got Dave Polwarth, who doesn't really have a home. He winds up with the Nancarrows. You can even say Sam Hain Aythorne is a lost child. His dad dies and he's left with a mother who shares his disability. And then there's Guy Sommet, one of my son's favorite characters, who has a working class father that despises him. I mean, really, anyway, but the ones we talked about, okay, I'm keeping an unofficial count here. I got 29 solid connections, lost child of those four things, we got 11 that are weak, the ones I just ran through. See, you got just in our cursory look at this, we got 40,
and this is not exhaustive.
That's right. So you got 40 lost children, weak and strong, in 21 books. I mean, just do the math, right? And seriously, some of the lost children are in like Cormoran Strike. He's in all those books. It's not like we just have one-off instances, though there are plenty of those. We've got instances like Harry and the Dark Lord. That's the foundation. That's the whole back drama of every one of the 7 books. Is how do we understand these lost children? And Cormoran Strike, his identity is what we're waiting to find out in books 8, 9, and 10. That and whether Charlotte committed suicide. But that's so. We're doing golden threads.
Yeah.
And we just covered, not exhaustively by any sense, but we did give a pretty forceful introduction to how many lost children there are inside the work of J.K. Rowling. There's the lost child who lives, and it's a great thing. That's Harry Potter, you know, and his crowd. There's the lost child who dies, and that's a bad thing, and that's the Dark Lord, Dennis Creed, etc. There's the lost child who died, and the parents, you know, are in agony about it, and that's that's Cretus Barebones. You know, no, excuse me. That's Corvus Lestrange. That was your example. And Lita Lestrange is the person who grieves, and her whole life is consumed by that. And then there's the child who dies, and there's kind of indifference to it, or the child, the parent doesn't, who is responsible, doesn't accept responsibility for it. And that would be, you know, like Donnie Lang and his Bairn child that he effectively murdered. But just instead of taking responsibility for that and feeling remorse, he attacks Cormoran Struck.
Yeah.
So is
Rowling unique in this? So is this the only writer that we can think of that has something approaching a golden thread running through their works?
No, I think every writer has golden threads. I mean, usually, like when you talk about psychobiography, is that they say that the first novel is the one that's the heaviest with psychological projection, you know, discharge, you know, wish fulfillment, etc. And that's why I think Casual Vacancy was drafted well before the end of Harry Potter. I think that was the book she was writing on. That book is just so, you know, you can't throw a dart at that book and not, you know, you can't flip it open and not find, for instance, from Rowling's life, you know, some trauma, some bad relationship she had. But I mean, I think of Anne Perry, the woman that, you know, she and her best buddy, you know, was it Australia or was it New Zealand? Anyway, somewhere down under. Aurora, if you're out there, tell me where Anne Perry, you know, murdered her friend's mother. Every one of Anne Perry's book has some shadow of that murder and her consequent experience in it. You can't read Anne Perry if you know that and not say, "Oh, here we go again." I think that's just to be expected. That's what Rowling is saying about The Lake and the Shed, is that these things don't go away. So here's our problem, and really everybody. This is not just authors. You know, literary history and personal experience both tell us that everyone has a critical juncture in their lives. Call it a negretto if you want. You know, perhaps Chrysalis is better, in which everything falls apart and a new person emerges, one shaped by that crisis or series of calamities. I think it's fair to say that's the saw away at coagula thing. You know, is that there's some Freudian family romance or drama, tragedy, from which the person emerges, for better or worse. For writers, you know, Dickens is the prototypical example. Each critical biography of the greatest English novelist, you know, that I own, the biographies that I own, that, and I've got a shelf of them. I think I counted. I think I have 8 critical biographies of Dickens. Every one of them focuses on his time as a young man when he worked in a bootblack factory while his father and family were in debtor's prison. Okay, I mean, you can't. Warren's blacking warehouse on Hungerford Stairs, very close to the Charing Cross Railroad Station. Okay, that's the foundation of the orphans in his book. Now, when I was running Harry Potter's bookshelf, I counted up how many of Dickens' novels featured suffering children. Okay, the final tally is a little bit like Lost Children inside J.K. Rowling. You got 15 Dickens novels, and 16 leading role characters without surviving parents or parents known to them. 2 novels feature title characters with only one parent, and only one Dickens, you know, the first book, Pickwick, which is an ad hoc collection of stories, does not feature an orphan or a neglected and estranged child. If there was a creature in Dickens's Lake of Inspiration, it came to life in Warrens's Blacking Warehouse. And I don't think he was unusual in this. If the severity of his experience was remarkable, okay, similar cases could be made for Dostoevsky, Nabokov, Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, among artists. That's not just among artists. I think it's true of all of us. This family romance, that Freud talks about of every child is as formative. There, that it's always there in everyone's psyche. It's the spring bubbling up in the lake. Now, our task here, as I described earlier at Harvard Professor, is to begin the fourth generation of Rowling studies, the one in which we shift from shed exclusively focused literary interpretation without any late concerns to one that includes Rowling's formative experiences, which means identifying as much as possible both her family romance and the life and mind pivotal moments that inform as inspiration her imaginative work. So, what are the possibilities, Nick, of the life event that inspired Rowling's Lost Child Golden Thread? I mean, this is going to parallel a lot of what we came up with for pregnancy traps, isn't it?
Yes, I guess so. So when we talked about pregnancy traps, we talked about the circumstances of Rowling's conception. So we knew that Rowling was conceived out of wedlock. That conception caused trauma for both their parents. So they were training to be in the Royal Navy. That went away. They moved across the country. So they're both from London. They were training in Scotland. They moved to the West Country so that her father could begin an apprenticeship, not a well-paid position to raise a family on the outskirts of Bristol. Is it likely that breakfast table conversation with Rowling and her parents would include the fact that her mother entrapped her father? It's unlikely, but it maybe it's the kind of thing that a teenage Rowling might have speculated about.
She certainly knew that her father didn't like her. Her father wanted a boy.
Yeah.
Her father said repeatedly to her that she was supposed to be a John, not a Johannes.
Yeah.
Or Simon? Yes. Was it Simon?
Yeah. So I mean, that's a possibility. The problem we have compared to Dickens scholars have got two advantages over us. Firstly, he's dead. Secondly, as John says, he's got 8 critical biographies, and I'm sure he hasn't got the majority that have been completed. Dickens scholars have been creating and expanding and embellishing biographies for more than 100 years. So anything we do necessarily is going to be speculative, outside of what Rowling has told us. So if we're thinking of a lost child, the lost child could be Rowling herself. So Rowling lost her mother to death at not a childhood, but at an impressionable age. She was certainly very poorly during the latter stages of her childhood. She was estranged from her father for many, many years. There was a brief period of contact after Harry Potter became successful, and then that was cut off again. She could consider herself to be that lost child. She had a miscarriage with Orontes, so she became pregnant. They got engaged. She lost the child.
Do we have any idea how far along she was when she had that miscarriage?
We don't have a good idea. So dates haven't been given. She's described it as a miscarriage rather than a stillbirth. And we know she's used the term stillbirth for Kinvara, so that would tend to suggest that it was at a period where the fetus wasn't considered viable. But we know she spoke on that podcast, The Witch Trials of J.K. Rowling, that she was conflicted at that time. So she got engaged because she was pregnant. When she lost the child, she thought, well, okay, that means we're not getting married anymore. And then she felt pressured into continuing with the relationship. She then, of course, got married, then became pregnant with Jessica. And as disastrous as that marriage was, that was the one of the great joyful moments of her life was having her daughter. Outside of that, that's as much information as we've been given. We just don't know. But we have many blind spots that we can only peer very dimly at.
But there's an obvious problem with both of those answers.
Yeah.
As the source of the inspiration for Harry Potter. Because Rowling says at the time of the inspiration to Harry Potter, which is the summer of 1990, isn't it?
Yes.
That almost all the story came to her.
Yeah.
So we're going to assume that we know about Merope Gaunt, we know about the Dark Lord, his backstory, Harry, all these lost children inside the book, Albus and Aberforth and Ariana, and that all comes to her pretty soon after. She doesn't write it down because she doesn't have a pencil in the train, but she says very soon after that she has that book, and she thinks of the Hogwarts saga as one book.
Yes,
it came out in 7 installments.
So at that point, her mother is very ill, but still very much alive.
And she was surprised when her mother died, right? So it wasn't like it was it wasn't like she was fading quickly, and this was haunting her.
I think
she says it goes off like a death charge in her life.
Yes,
but that's December of 1990.
Yes, she still has. We've got to assume at least some relationship with her father, because she still has a relationship with her mother, and they're living together, and there's no hint of another woman at that time. She has a boyfriend, long-term boyfriend, that at the point of inspiration she was looking at properties in Manchester so that she could move up to Manchester to be with him.
She was actually coming back from Manchester, though, on the train, right, to London.
She was coming back, yeah.
So we don't know what,
but we
really
do
what that
know
trip was about.
We do know that she wrote out the rules to Quidditch in a hotel in Manchester, which would indicate that she hadn't yet found a property to live in. So this would have been pre being employed by the Chamber of Commerce in Manchester.
Okay, and the second one you mentioned as a possibility was the disastrous marriage and the miscarriage, the lost child in Portugal. But that's after.
That's after.
Not only the conception of Harry Potter.
Yes.
But the death of Anne Rowling, and she's actively working on the book at that point.
Yes.
So it can't be considered the thing that bubbled up out of her lake, because that's afterwards. Now, it's certainly both those experiences had to have colored the writing of Harry Potter. I think Rowling says when she writes the Mirror of Erised chapter, she was astonished how much the death of her mother had colored that scene.
Yeah.
But it couldn't have inspired the story of the boy who lived. Is there anything else that we know of? In that, you talked about her relationship with Michael. It's problematic, right? Because she's described it as off and on. Right. So,
yes, we have no real details of that. It's really tempting, but again, it's the disadvantage that we have. So when we talk unofficially on the back channels, Michael I see as Matthew, I've even tried to look, demonstrate that most likely he worked in finance, and I can't do that to any degree of certainty. But it's tempting to do that. But again, what I'm trying to do is find something in the text and apply it to her life, and that's never going to be an exact science, because writers are creative people.
Yeah, the Lake Spring isn't
Yeah,
writing biography. It's expressing an unresolved issue.
yeah.
I would choose a different character for Michael, but it's from your favorite book. And this is a dicey business, but I think the split in the four instances, in the child lives four instances of lost child, between positive and negative, are telling. That and the closest fictional lost child who dies with grieving mother in Rowling's work is as well. That both point to her. And here's the explosive point here. I think the best possible explanation for all these lost children is that Rowling had an abortion, and that she remains very much of two minds about that procedure.
So I can see people screaming at the screen now, saying, "How is this any of our damn business?" And that's a fair point. That is a fair point. So we have a living author who has a private life and has successfully defended that private life. So what she chooses to release, she releases. But she hasn't cooperated yet with any sort of a biography. But I do think when an author has something like a golden thread, she's trying to express something. And I think part of our role as readers of her work is to accept that expression and try and figure out what the author is trying to tell us.
That's exactly what she says. She says this in Silkworm, really the foundation novel, the Cormoran Strike stories, right? The tropes that Quine leaves inside the book are all through his books.
Yes.
What does Robin say about that? That there's Strike.
Why does he keep saying this? Why does he keep repeating himself? And the response is, well, maybe because what the author's trying to get at hasn't been understood yet.
Or I would suggest hasn't been resolved. She's offered this, that this is a Lake issue that is not resolved. Now, and we've been discussing this, as you said, for years on the moderator back channels at Hogwarts Professor. But I've only hinted at the idea of Rowling's having had an abortion in public posts and podcasts before now. And the holdup, for me, has been, the mysterious Michael. We don't talk that much about Neil Murray or Jessica Orontes or, David or any of the children, except as they're reflected in Rowling's work. Like they are. I mean, Rowling talks about it in Christmas Big, because like the children of presidents, these people are properly off limits. They didn't choose to be party to the Rowling circus, and just as she does everything in her power to protect them, we don't post that much about them. Anything about the possibility that Rowling sprang a deliberate or unconscious pregnancy trap on her boyfriend of many years, and that she had an abortion consequent to his refusing to be trapped or her decision to do it anyway, will inevitably lead to his being discovered, his being doorstepped, and forgive me, he'll wear that that dead child like an albatross for the rest of his life. That's the only thing he'll be known for if it's that big a deal in Rowling's work. And I don't know if that's fair to him or not. But I've come to the conclusion, we're talking about this today, that yes, it is fair. Rowling does not think that there is anything wrong with abortion being legal. And her abortion, if there was one, either happened with her boyfriend's consent or without it, which regardless means from her view or his, puts him in the clear morally. Okay? Feticide is, in the end, is not a mistake women make with or without the consent of their partners, but as the partisans say, it's a choice, right? It's a deliberate decision. Discussing that publicly in countries where abortion is legal and claimed as a right is not a taboo that has to be observed. The same, of course, applies to shelving this discussion out of respect for Rowling's privacy. She's a public figure. She's the best-selling author of our times. She's a feminist who has publicly supported abortion rights. And this is the most important part. She is a writer who has invited her serious readers to look into her lake to understand the genesis of her work and come to a greater appreciation of her work through that understanding. We have her permission then, even her encouragement. We even have her encouragement to track her golden threads, which I think includes the possibility that the lost child in her life, the baby in the lake, if you will, is the womb child she killed that inspired the Harry Potter novels. That basically she and Michael conceived the child willingly or unwillingly, and they or she decided to kill the child. And that this has been something which still is not a resolved issue in her mind. And last, of my three reasons here, by far the most important, if this speculation is correct, then it will be a la Dickens in the bootblack factory and his consequent lost child golden thread, the one that he has, rather than being clickbait gossip, is an important stepping stone to appreciating the shed artistry and meaning of the consequent work. Okay, so I get it. We've sat on this for I don't know how many years, Nick, but a lot of 3 or 4 years we've had back and forth, and there's been real disagreements in the back channels.
Yes,
about this, where people, if you publish this, I'm out of here and I'll disavow everything. Fine. That's
so. This is my position. So if we had discovered a la Oakton documentary evidence that J.K. Rowling had an abortion, I would say we can't publish this. This is private. Nope. Off limits. What we're doing is speculating on a life event based on textual analysis of the work that she's published. That is not an invasion of privacy because she's published this work. And because it's speculation, there is every chance we could be wrong. The authorized biography could come out. It could explain this lake inspiration, and we'd be going, of course. How could we not have spotted that? I guess for me, the point about whether we should, so we can do it, the point about whether we should do it is what is the benefit? What are we getting out of this? What can we use this to deepen our understanding of the work in a valuable way?
Yeah, that's the test, and we'll be talking about that tomorrow. Okay. But right now, I want to say, some of the evidence we have in the text that suggests that the abortion spring to that lake event, the baby in the lake, is, that unresolved issue in Rowling's subconscious mind. And obviously now in her conscious mind. You can't have this many lost children in the work where Rowling hasn't confronted this issue, herself privately. And to get to that, before I say how you read the books through an abortion lens and how that helps you understand the books, that's a whole nother story. Here, I just want to talk about, the notes, of abortion, sort of the pointers that this is what she's talking about. And the first one comes in the nicknames of the two lost children that we talked about first, Nick. Basically, Harry Potter and the Dark Lord. Harry Potter is known as the boy who lived. Okay, as opposed to the boy who died, right? I mean, the boy who lived and the chosen one. If you'd have to be living, under a rock not to understand that the whole abortion agony politically is between those who are pro-life and those who are pro-choice. The theory is called the chosen one, suggests that he's a child that was chosen and wanted, and he lived. Makes sense, right? But the doppelganger, the Dark Lord, is known as he who must not be named. Okay? If Merope Gaunt had had an abortion, the greatest evil wizard would not have been born or named. Okay? She had no choice in this, of course, being, at the time this is, and she died in childbirth, okay, to this negative lost child. And you can put Dennis Creed and Delphine Diggory in this same category. Harry, as the chosen one, reflects his being a wanted child whose time with loving parents as an infant protected him from the Dursleys' abuse, as his mother's love protected him from the Dark Lord. Okay, the two, Harry and Tom, there are stick figures in a sense for pro-abortion, euphemistically pro-choice arguments. If Rowling was of two minds before and after an abortion she had, that would be the lake inspiration for the core conflict in the Hogwarts saga. Now, the closest lost child parallel that we have in Rowling's work to her life is Gloria Conti, okay? A young woman who finds herself trapped in a relationship with a dangerous, soul-crushing man. This woman who has an abortion, she escapes overseas and lives happily ever after in a good marriage with family, okay? But she remains forever conflicted about the feticide, okay? Simultaneously, she lauds Margot Bamborough, who facilitated the death of her womb child, as the bravest woman she'd ever known and someone who saved her life. She says, the very last sentence in the chapter where all the Gloria Conti interview with Robin and Cormoran is, that woman saved me and I've never, ever forgotten her. She was one of the bravest, kindest people I've ever known, period, full stop, closed chapter. But when you go into the center of that chapter and the meaning is in the middle, Conti is still very much conflicted about that termination. She explains why she did it. And she says, so she wouldn't wind up like a single working mom that Janice Beatty is, the evil person in the story. She doesn't want to wind up like a psychopath. But she Gloria breaks down when describing it to the detectives and says she always thinks of the baby on the 14th September anniversary of the child's execution. I brought my troubled blood out with me. I don't always carry this with me, Nick. I know you think that I always have a copy of Troubled Blood within arm's reach, but I don't. I thought abortion was a sin, said Gloria. That's the way I was raised. She didn't think it was a sin, not Margot, even though she's told her best friend and her husband that her thoughts had changed about abortion consequent to the birth of Anna. She talked to me about the life I was likely to have with Luca if I had the baby. We discussed me keeping it alone, but we both knew Luca wouldn't want that he'd be in my life forever if I had his kid. It was hard then, being on your own with a child. I was watching Janice, the nurse, doing it, always juggling her son and the job. Okay. So, then she tells the whole thing about the story. And how much she helped her. Margot says to her, now, Gloria, you've got to be brave. If you stay with Luca, this will happen again. We need to find you a job away from London and make sure he doesn't know where you've gone. And she said something that stayed with me always. We aren't our mistakes. It's what we do about the mistake that shows who we are. And she doesn't do that. She stays with Luca and, spirals out. But she eventually does do that. Basically, she says she hears the voice of Margot telling her to escape after Margot's death. Now, clearly, Margot Bamberger could have found a job for her overseas, pregnant and out of Luca's reach. But no, she took her to the abortion clinic. And every year on 14 September, while she's saying that Margot saved her life, she's also conflicted.
So I've always been fairly satisfied that Gloria Conti's attitude to abortion are a fairly faithful description of Rowling's own, and that, of course, is a dangerous thing to do. You should never take the words of an author's character as being the author's own opinion, unless you're reading Michael Fancourt, and then you can be fairly sure that it's exactly what he's thinking.
Am I right, though, in suggesting that Gloria Conti is, outside of Casual Vacancy, the character that most closely resembles Rowling's life?
I think that's worthy of more consideration. At first sight, yeah, it's pretty close. Yeah, it's pretty close. And that could have been her if she had met someone other than Orontes when she'd moved abroad. That could have been her.
That's right. Okay, yeah. Now, we talked in our Pregnancy Trap Golden Thread, that Rowling Studies podcast. And really, if you want to, you want more of this, there's 2 hours there. Okay, about when is the most likely time this might have happened in Rowling's life, and that's during her 7-year off and on relationship with Michael. The text that we have suggests that Rowling had an abortion for reasons related to her vocation as a writer. Satchel says that the biggest obstacle to being a successful artist is the pram in the hallway, having a child. He quotes another author who says that. Fancourt says that there were no great woman authors who were mothers. All right. This is in, she's quoting artists and writers here, saying things that may have been her own experience. She says she's heard those things. It can be that she just realized there was something seriously wrong with Michael, that he's Luca Ricci. The person I think of, though, Nick, when I think about Rowling, presenting Michael inside the story, is Gavin Hughes in Casual Vacancy. Because here you've got Kay Bowden with her daughter, and Gavin Hughes is just using her. She's just a
commitment phobic, lazy, happy to take it as he gets it, but putting no effort in.
Yeah, seriously. Okay, so there's a vocation that says you can't be a single mom and be a successful writer. Then there's the dad is an absolute cretin, and why would I want to have his baby? Or she just imagines single motherhood to be the end of her marriage possibilities. That's Janice Beatty, right? That she's going to be like, life isn't so good for me that I'm going to be, someone that someone's going to want to marry as a wannabe writer with a kid. Now, if this is the case, imagine Rowling's reflection on her choice, given that her being a single mom did not prevent her from becoming a world famous author or a happily married woman.
And that's absolutely not to do down the struggle. Yeah. So those deepest, darkest moments of her life in Edinburgh, when she had reached rock bottom, failed in everything she's ever tried to do. We're not doing that down. But actually, when she started to turn that corner, she's working, she's earning money, she's managed to get her manuscript published. It's that story that helps to propel her, this struggling single mother. On benefits, it's that fairy tale story that helps to propel it. It wasn't a hindrance at that point.
But she hated the Cinderella story.
Yeah, but editors loved it. Editors.
Yeah, that's right. But I'm saying that may have been why she hated it so much.
Yeah.
because if she decided to have, prenatal infanticide, she decided to, to have the abortion. People, when I say feticide and prenatal infanticide, okay, that may make people shudder. Why don't I use the term abortion? Abortion is a euphemism when it's applied to prenatal infanticide. Abortion is a technical term for a woman who miscarries. A woman who intentionally miscarries, either chemically or through a surgical procedure, that's a medical abortion. That's an intentional abortion. Yeah. I don't like to use the word that way, but it's universally understood there that way.
Yeah, and people who regularly watch this show will know that John and I have very different political views, social views. We have different people with different views. In order to have a sensible conversation, you have to be tolerant of other people's language use. So John tries not to tell me how I should use my socialist-centric words, and I try not to tell John. As long as we can understand each other, that's communication.
Right. Anyway, back to the lost child. Yeah. I had to explain that because I'm sure people in the comments will say, "Why do you keep saying that?" Anyway, if Rowling's lost child golden thread reflects her subconscious mind's agony over this mistaken decision, okay, because it didn't, having a child didn't prevent her from being a world famous author. How does that jibe with her quite deliberate and continued support of second wave feminism's foundational position? She's tweeted flat out. She was asked in a Twitter thread, "Do you support abortion?" Point blank, "Yes, I do. That's a fair question," she said. Okay, now, and people are going to say, "Well, John, please don't talk about feminism, John." But there is one school of feminism that says abortion is a mixed bag.
The Gloria Conti position.
That's right. And this is the liberation feminism that Germaine Greer championed, and that Camille Paglia, who admires Germaine Greer as much as Rowling does. This is, but it's definitely an outlier and contrarian branch of feminism. Okay, this one holds, liberation feminism holds that abortion is essential if women are to have any hope of freeing themselves from slavery to nature and biological necessities that men do not know, namely pregnancy and the nurturing and caring for children. That if a woman is going to be free of these biological shackles, she has to have the political freedom, the legal freedom to terminate a pregnancy. But, okay, both Paglia and Greer insist at the same time that abortion is the murder of an innocent, defenseless, and voiceless human being, and that the woman opting for feticide has to look this biological fact in the face, okay? And Paglia said flat out that the pro-life partisans in the abortion debate will always necessarily hold the moral high ground. And they tell these women, okay, that have abortions and don't feel that they are denying the truth of biology. This is biology-based feminism, right? And if Rowling's feminism needs a prefix, I think biology-based would be a good one, right? Rowling's conflict here would be especially dearly felt because of her core beliefs in the immortality of the soul and her refusal to ignore biological reality, one that is very evident in her stance contra those chanting that transgender women are women. She just says, no, biologically, that's a stupid statement. Trans-identifying men are not women. That exact position is the position of Paglia, who's been a transgender woman for 40, 50 years, and Germaine Greer. Okay.
And I think
Rowling's repeat.
I think if you look at what Rowling has actually stated, I think it supports that position. So if we look at the most recent statement in 2022, she said she thinks all women should have the rights to safe, legal abortion should they wish to terminate a pregnancy. Now, responses to that on both sides of the argument say Rowling's in favour of abortion. That's not what she said. She's absolutely not said that. She said she thinks all women should have the rights to safe, legal abortion should they wish to terminate a pregnancy.
You're right. That's not a carte blanche.
No.
I mean, there are bumper stickers in the United States that say "I heart abortion." Rowling's statement is not "I heart abortion."
No, because she's not a lunatic.
And that, that biology-based feminist position.
Yeah.
Okay, you have to remember that Rowling has repeatedly asserted, especially at the time of Casual Vacancies release, that a core theme of her work, which she describes as the thread running through it, is mortality and morality. Okay, beyond the catchy assness points. Okay, that this thing points to, mortality and morality points to her seeing death as something to fear beyond the end of life as we know it, but because of some sense of judgment. And you can't read the King's Cross scene without that sense of, that once one dies, one is going to see the consequences. One's going to see the state of one's immortal soul at that point. Okay. Beyond the near constant plot point of pregnancy traps and lost children in her work, this Lake moment would explain, in part, her effort to care for the caged children who were not aborted in Romania, as well as orphans globally, and her advocacy for the voiceless innocents being coerced into transition via surgical mutilation and chemical castration to transgender identity, as well as for women affected by trans-identifying men identifying their safe and reserved spaces. Okay, so I think the texts and her life, and there's a hole in there that this has to be considered a credible possibility. One that, I don't know if you've been following this, Nick, but there's a influencer in the United States, a political commentator named Candace Owens, who has been very public in her insistence that the wife of the president of France is a man, a trans-identifying man. And this has caused the president of the United States to call Candace Owens and say, "Stop! You're ruining this woman's life. She's just an old woman." And Candace Owens has just refused to back down on that assertion, and now she has said, "This is an easy problem to solve. If they think that I'm saying something scandalous and horrible and this and that, do the biology test. Just prove me wrong." The Macrons apparently are suing Candace Owens in the United States for defamation, libel, etc. That's going to be a hard case in the United States because Candace Owens clearly believes she's simply speaking the truth. And with the First Amendment protections, that's a hard thing for them to get. But anyway, that's going on. But Rowling's kind of in the same position. If someone says to her, "Have you had an abortion?" she can simply say yes or no. She doesn't have to prove it. I think we'll all take her word for it on something that important. This is not a tough thing. So all that we said today, and all that we're going to say on her birthday, happy birthday, Joe, is about how this interpretation is actually useful for understanding, really comprehending her genius and her artistry, how she's transformed that Lake event into something which brings out something really important for all people as lost children. Okay.
I think for the people that are still watching, that haven't switched off in disgust or thrown something at their laptops, that for me, whether this is valuable or not, that's going to be the test. So do join us tomorrow and judge us on that. And if we're wasting our time, well, sorry, we've wasted a couple of hours of your time, but judge us after that.
And if this, after tomorrow's show, where we'll talk about, what, not just about all the lost children, and the grieving caretakers. That's I think undeniable. It's like the pregnancy traps. Once you see them, you're like, wow, look at them all. They're everywhere. They're growing on trees. Once you take this thing and say, okay, if Rowling is writing in large part in response to her conscious, because remember, the shed work is conscious deliberation. The spring in the lake brings it up, but the shed is her intentional artistry with that material. What does it tell us about what Rowling is thinking? What is the trope, like back to Silkworm? What is the theme that she's trying to tease out here that she wants us to see? Is it this liberation feminism? Tune in tomorrow on Rowling's birthday for what may be an event that brings into the second life and a new life to Rowling studies. If we're right, this could be a landmark event.
Thank you, John.
Or a lot of egg on my face. I'm gonna have another Dulce sandwich.
Please join us tomorrow, everyone. We'll see you then.